Hi everyone, Ricardo Gonçalves with SBS on the Money for this Wednesday, the 17th of February 2021. It is your daily 10-minute business and finance news wrap. Later, Domino's Pizza and the pandemic, plus what it's doing about diversity. But first, let's start off with the supermarket retailer Coles. It has seen a half-year profit of $560 million, an increase of 14.5%. Sales rose at its supermarkets division along with liquor and express. But while it's benefited from pandemic panic shopping, it's warned supermarket growth may actually fall this half and into the new financial year. For more on that, I spoke earlier with its CEO, Steven Cain. Stephen, there's no doubt the first half was strong, but I think investors are already looking to the future. So to what extent has sales growth slowed in the current half?
You're right, it was a cracking first half of the year. We, I think, exceeded expectations in terms of sales, profit, customer safety and so on. So we're very pleased with the first half. I think as far as the second half is concerned, we've seen some softening in demand, particularly in Victoria. And we've also noticed that produce prices are coming down quickly, particularly in vegetable lines. So that's impacting sales. As we go forward, what we've said is that we are going to be cycling all of the positive tailwinds of COVID in March. So that's next month. What we've also said is that immigration isn't going to be helping drive sales. So when we look backwards over time, for the last few decades, immigration has driven a third of all supermarket growth and lots of other industries as well. And obviously immigration won't come back until the vaccine's been rolled out and been proven to be effective. So it impacts the supermarket sector as well as a lot of other businesses.
You've mentioned immigration, but what about the end of JobKeeper? Are you worried about that?
Well, I think first of all we should congratulate the government on introducing it. It was a brave move, it was a big move, it was an expensive move, but it's worked. Unemployment is in a far better shape than we ever thought it could be. I think when it comes off, supermarkets are usually in a good position when times are tough because people stop spending money on other discretionary items. So that we should recognise there's a lot of people who are doing okay because they're not travelling and they're not spending money on things they used to spend money on pre-COVID. But there's going to be some people who are unemployed doing it tough. And obviously as Coles, we've got to cater for the whole nation. And that's what we'll be doing.
When you look back at your business now compared with a year ago pre-pandemic, what do you think are the lasting changes of COVID-19, both from a business perspective and from a consumer point of view?
Well, we start with the customer first. Some significant changes. They're shopping more online. We've made a lot of changes to our online business, and that's both in supermarkets and liquor. They're doing more scratch cooking. We expect that to come off a little bit and people will get back to convenience, particularly for those who are working in dual income households. Convenience will be important again. I think hygiene will stick around for a bit yet. I think people are much more conscious of washing their hands and distancing and so on. So that's there to stay. And then the whole sort of going online to find out what's on promotion, recipes, rather than relying on your paper door-to-door catalogue. That's all changing. And then obviously for those who have been office-based in the past, I think that they will continue to work part-time from home. So that sort of will be here to stay. From our business point of view, we've made a lot of changes, particularly around health and hygiene and safety in our stores. I think a lot of that will remain going forward. We've got to make sure that customers and team members feel safe in our stores, and that's absolutely paramount. What we've also tried to do is to sort of continue to change our ranges to make sure that we cater for people on a budget and people who are looking for an affordable luxury. So yeah, lots of changes that we could never have forecast. The other one that we announced today was customer packing benches. So you'll recall that at one point customers were encouraged to pack their own bags. There are a number of customers who want to continue to do that. And so we've introduced new benches that would make it easier for them to do that sort of thing as well. So there's another change that we've incorporated into the business.
Steven Cain there, CEO of Coles. Another business that benefited from the pandemic is Domino's. It has seen an underlying half-year profit of $96 million, up 32.8%. Most of that growth is coming from Japan and Europe. For more on that, including his thoughts on diversity, the environment and delivery riders, I spoke earlier with its CEO, Don Meij. Don, let's start with the Australian business if we can. How many pizzas did Australians eat during the pandemic?
Oh my gosh, that's an interesting number. I think we've served over 100 million over the last 12 months, which is coming up to almost the anniversary of the pandemic.
Can you talk through growth? What's growth been like for both the Australian and your business internationally?
Yeah, so the Australian New Zealand business has led for many, many years, but it is getting to a higher penetration, and so therefore the growth is slowing relative to the global geographies. 2/3 of our growth now is coming out of Japan and Europe, and that's rightfully so. We service 340 million people as a group. Those countries have a bigger GDP than China when you add them together, and a larger population in the US.
You mentioned growth, I guess, is starting to slow a bit in Australia. So how do you try to keep growth momentum? Or were the opportunities to come out of COVID, especially via online channels, was that a bit of a one-off?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. In Australia, it hasn't been a one-off because we really haven't been as affected as some of the other markets. And what I mean by that is long lockdown periods, restricting the population. Of course, we've had border controls and so on. But what happens in our business over COVID is that delivery boomed, but pickup went away. And it didn't always compensate for itself in Australia. So in a post-COVID world, we do expect delivery to continue to climb, but we do expect some of the carryout to return.
Are you worried about the economic implications because of the end of JobKeeper?
Look, of course, when I think of that as an Australian citizen, from a business point of view, Domino's is always such a great value product. During good or tough times, it seems to resonate with different parts of the community. So from a business operator, no, it's not something that's keeping me up at night or I'm concerned about.
What are you doing to ensure the safety of your delivery drivers, given we've seen a recent spate of cyclist deaths and injuries?
What's so important, and this is a really good question, at Domino's, only Domino's will deliver. We do not use subcontractors, which are, no care and responsibility in many other cases. In our case, our drivers are trained. We wear reflective gear. We're, in many cases, on a Domino's vehicle. These are paid team members getting full workers' comp, getting full penalty rates. That's really important to us, and that's across the globe. We do not employ contractor drivers anywhere in a Domino's business. Even if we use an aggregator service, we will do the delivery. And then things like GPS driver tracker is part of making sure that we can track for harshness of driving and if there was any speeding, so we can talk to team members and correct behaviour. We measure incidents in our business. So yeah, team member safety has always been paramount to Domino's. We're a delivery-born business. I've been in this business 34 years. I was a delivery driver for the first 2 years of my career. So safety's always been paramount, and it's one of the biggest reasons why only Domino's is delivered by Domino's.
So would you like to see further reform in those other businesses or the industry in general?
Yeah, look, it's not something we don't often speak out against other businesses, but yes, of course, any safety features, any sort of activity that can keep taking things up the ladder, whether that's food safety, team member safety for delivery, it is important. I think that we all have an obligation to do everything we possibly can, that for every single team member, none left behind, that we make sure that we do everything we can possibly do.
And just finally, do you have any diversity or environmental targets, and how do they compare with what's inside the business now?
Yes, definitely we do. And, as a business, we don't just exist to make a profit. We're obligated to do a lot of good. We've set a target for a greater diversity in our leadership team, that we will be 40% male, 40% female, and 20% from any gender. We've got a lot of work to do in that area. We've made some good progress, but we're not proud yet of the results we're getting. We've also set targets around having zero carbon emissions for running of our stores, so that our delivery fleets, our food distribution, the energy that our stores are run on. So we're making great progress. In fact, in Europe, we're a leader. We've got markets where we're going to be 100% electric for our vehicles within the next 18 months. And we've been improving our single-use packaging. We've set a target internally to improve the carbon footprint of our trucks that are taking food to our stores in Europe within the next 4 years. You're going to see a lot more targets coming to the market, because what we believe is what gets measured gets done. And we don't always have the answer when we set the target, but what we do know is when we do set targets, we achieve them. And that's what we're going after.
Don Meij from Domino's Pizza Enterprises there, the CEO. Now to the Australian share market. The S&P ASX 200 down today by 0.46%, 6885. After the market closed, Rio Tinto posted an underlying full-year profit of $12.4 billion and paid a record or announced a record dividend of $5.57. For more on the day's market action, I spoke earlier with Luke Larative from Seneca Financial Solutions. Luke, the market lost a bit of ground today. Why?
It's all about earnings season at the moment, Ricardo. So, while there's been plenty to be pleased about, there are certain companies that are large kind of weights in the index that are kind of dragging returns, mainly in the supermarket sector and a little bit in the property sector as well. And we've seen some weakness in healthcare names like Nanosonics and ResMed today. So mainly just more to do with the stock specifics than anything kind of more broad-based.
Before we talk about the supermarket retailers, let's talk about Westpac. It's one of the larger companies and it had a really good move on the share market today. A quarterly update, what did it say?
Look, Westpac's had done a fantastic result, and to be honest, it's the second 2 of 2 from the banking sector. CBA also had a really good result. Westpac's profits were up 54%. They've seen an increase in margins, reduction in costs, and a reduction in bad debts and impairments. So that's all good things for a bank. I think most importantly, though, they have guided to continued margin pressure going forward, as well as, not to sort of extrapolate this result out to 3 more quarters for the full year result. So I think investors need to be a little bit careful there, but it does look good to me. And the banking sector, something that we're overweight in at the moment and we think is a good space to be in.
We heard from quite a number of retailers today. What do we know about the impact of COVID-19 on these businesses?
Most retailers are doing well at the moment and are putting out sets of really impressive numbers. I think it's a case more of investors' expectations getting ahead of stocks like Coles, for example, which have battled. They're down about 5% today on the back of a reasonably in line and pretty solid result on the whole, but probably investors expecting a little bit more. That being said, there are companies like Webjet, for example, where investors' expectations were very low, and despite them still, profits still going backwards sort of 240% for the year, the market's ticked that up 3%. So it's more a case of where are investors' expectations versus what companies can deliver. Other names like super retail groups saw a really nice bump. They've got a BCF business now that's doing 71% like-for-like sales growth, doing really well in Rebel Sport and Super Cheap Auto. And we did see some other auto names perform very well this week, like ARB and Batco.
Isn't the issue now for a lot of the retailers that did well during COVID to maintain sales growth?
Yeah, it's definitely a case of, being able to keep that operating momentum. But I think the businesses that have invested in their brand, been able to use this period to deepen their relationship with customers, to, gain their market share, they're the ones that are going to be able to maintain this growth momentum. And while the ones that haven't been able to do that and maybe been a little bit behind the 8 ball, they're the ones that are going to be ceding market share to these more innovative and sort of aggressive businesses.
Now, what does this all mean for dividends? Because we've seen some healthy dividends announced across a number of sectors, especially the retailers and the banks. So where do you see them going?
We see this next sort of 12 to 24 month period as a boom period for dividends, not just in your traditional companies like the banks, which we think, will start to pay healthier and healthier dividends as their confidence around the COVID-19 kind of economic recovery continues to grow. But also in these retailers we discussed, they're making, very large profits at the moment, spitting off huge amounts of free cash flow. And we think that's going to be a catalyst for higher dividends and potentially other capital management like special dividends or buybacks.
Luke, the market lost a bit of ground today. Why?
It's all about
Luke Larative there from Seneca Financial Solutions. That is SBS On The Money for this Wednesday, the 17th of February 2021. I'm Ricardo Gonçalves. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Business Ricardo. This On The Money stream is provided for informational purposes only. The content in this stream should not be understood as constituting advice or a recommendation. It's not personal advice and it doesn't consider your personal circumstances or objectives. You should contact a licensed professional before making any financial decision.